family. Since then, she has devoted her life to making sure Manson and the others in his family stay in jail. Nisa and Jerry Moskowitz. Their daughter Stacy was murdered by David Berkowitz. He, of course, the so-called Son of Sam killer here in New York in the late 70s. That was a time when every woman in this town lived in fear. Chris and Ginny Peterson are lucky to even be here today to tell their story. They both survived an attack by Richard Ramirez, the Los Angeles Night Stalker. And Dolores Nieder, whose son John was killed by mass murderer John Wayne Gacy. Manson, Berkowitz, Ramirez, Gacy. You would think that such infamous people would never even have the most remote chance of getting out of jail ever. Well, you'd be wrong. You'd be dead wrong. Watch. Charles Manson, perhaps the most infamous mass killer of our times. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 1971 for sending a brutal wolf pack to commit the Tate and LaBianca murders. Years later, there is a tendency to forget they stabbed Sharon Tate 16 times while she was 8 months pregnant. But Manson got lucky. He was a member of the so-called class of 72. The group of condemned killers feared execution, and the Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional. Manson is technically eligible for parole.
I killed nobody. I broke no law.
Son of Sam, the 24-year-old postal worker who stalked the alleys and lovers' lanes in the city of New York during the late 70s, preying on love-struck couples. Every woman with long brown hair was terrorized by the reports of the .44 caliber homicidal maniac. David Berkowitz today sits behind bars, awaiting a possible parole. And if the words Son of Sam don't send chills up your spine, then maybe it's the memory of the Night Stalker who'll bring on the nightmares. Richard Ramirez took the lives of 14 people. Before he murdered them, he raped and sodomized his victims. He, too, sits living and breathing in a California jail cell. The prototype of the thoroughly modern mass murderer is Richard Speck, a man who brutally killed 8 nursing students in Chicago in 1966. Speck became eligible for parole in 1976, just 10 years after the heinous crimes were committed. Next year, he'll again appear in front of the parole board, requesting his release from prison. Another Midwestern monster is John Wayne Gacy, killer of 33 young boys buried under his home in suburban Chicago. America's most prolific murderer, Gacy has appealed his death sentences and has become an artist in prison.
I hope he does get the electric chair. Then it'll make everybody feel better. I'm sure it'll make the other mothers feel better, too.
And let's never forget Gary Heidnik, who in his Philadelphia house of horrors took the lives of 2 women, sexually enslaved and tortured 4 others in his basement. Heidnik recently asked for the death sentence, but under Pennsylvania law, his request was denied. Joel Steinberg, the monster who brutally beat his 6-year-old adopted daughter Lisa to death and savagely maimed his lover Hedda Nussbaum, now sits behind bars on Rikers Island. After receiving a maximum 25-year sentence on a manslaughter rap, under New York law, Steinberg should be free in about 15 years. Just listen to what this manipulating child killer told Fox TV's The Reporters.
I've been cast as the worst pariah of the decade. The public sees me as a heinous character whose nails were bitten to the bone.
The most recent addition to the barbarians is Daniel Rakowitz, the Texas drifter charged with murdering his roommate. He dismembered her and stripped off her flesh. Her remains were then boiled, while her head and bones were later found in a bus terminal locker. Her alleged assailant, the 28-year-old Rakowitz, gave me an exclusive interview that you'll hear later in this broadcast. Manson, Berkowitz, Ramirez, Speck, Gacy, Heidnik, Steinberg, all vicious killers who, unlike their victims, continue to breathe life on this earth and who one day could be set free. Before we meet our survivors, let me introduce a distinguished group of experts here to try to get inside the minds of these mass killers. First, Dr. Gary Glass. He's an associate professor of psychiatry at the Temple School of Medicine in Philadelphia. He is an expert in forensic psychiatry. Next to him, old friend of ours, Jamie Allen Fox, the professor of criminal justice at Northeastern University in Boston, co-author of the book Mass Murder. Maury Terry, author of the book The Ultimate Evil. Maury is an expert on the Son of Sam case, having spoken with Berkowitz for at least 6 hours. And last but certainly not least, Richard Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher is a highly decorated retired detective from the New York City Police Department. He actually worked on the Son of Sam case. But let me begin with Chris and Ginny Peterson, survivors of Richard Ramirez, survivors of the Night Stalker, the man who took over a dozen lives in Los Angeles. Ginny, why don't you just describe what happened when Ramirez came into your home that night?
He entered through an unlocked door through the back entrance and entered into the bedroom. I awoke to see a man standing there. I shouted at him, "Who are you? What do you want?" We argued back and forth for a moment or two. And then he leaned over and shot me directly in the face. As I fell backwards, he leaned over then and shot my husband. We laid back down on the bed and stunned because we couldn't believe that we had been shot. It was the furthest thing from our minds. There was no pain at the time. Then we became aware that he was standing over us laughing. At that time, my husband rose up and gave chase. He chased him down the hallway because we had a small daughter at the other end. Ramirez fired two more shots, to which my husband faked being hit. He was grazed by one of the bullets, so that if Ramirez came at him again, perhaps he could tackle him. At that point, he turned and ran out of the house.
Chris, you and your wife are probably the luckiest. On the one hand, so desperately unlucky that this monster would come to your home. On the other hand, miraculously, you survived. You two, unarmed, at night, in your own home here. A veteran killer shooting at you at point-blank range. Do you reflect on this man that did this to you?
I think of him continuously. I have a constant reminder. I have physical problems, and I have tinnitus in my ear. And I dwell upon it more than I should. But I promised my daughter that I'd make sure he was always locked away on this.
As you know, Ramirez was convicted. Do you believe the state of California will execute him?
They will, but I don't believe that'll be within 10 years.
Your reaction to that? You're sitting alongside Doris Tate,
I'm fully
the
aware.
mother of Sharon Tate, the woman so brutally murdered by the Charles Manson disciples, a man who still breathes life, all of his disciples still alive. Doris, your daughter, dead. Do you think they'll really get Ramirez?
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough to, at the request of the director of the Department of Corrections, okay, to come on his advisory board. Now, that's throughout the state. And yes, they're going to get him, okay?
We've got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll talk to the survivors, the experts, people who should never get out of jail, our focus. Before we get to that Daniel Rakowitz VTR, Dolores, how do you react to the fact that your son John, one of 33 victims of John Wayne Gacy, on the one hand is gone now these 10 years, while Gacy has become quite a celebrity, hasn't he?
Yes, he has.
Just describe what Gacy is now.
Gacy is given art supplies to do drawings, which are sold. As a matter of fact, one of his paintings was put into the Art Institute in Chicago.
The Art Institute, for people outside of Chicago, is a very, very prestigious institution. How they could do, why? What's the justification for that?
I called the governor's office, but prior to that time, Gacy's drawings were being sold at our state fair, the Illinois State Fair. And I called the governor's office, but naturally I could not speak with the governor. But he had an aide go to the state fair, and he was going to confiscate the drawings. But by that time, all of them had been sold. They tell me that he has given art supplies because for rehabilitation. I don't want Gacy rehabilitated. I don't want Gacy to have any more appeals. I want Gacy to die. He snuffed out 33 lives that we know of. God knows how many more. What he has done to the victims' parents and families is unbelievable. There should be a certain number of appeals, and that is the end. On November 4th, about 3 years ago, Gacy was supposed to be executed. November 4th came and went, and not one word was said. I wrote a letter to the governor, and I pleaded with him to hurry up these, well, whatever you want to call it, his privileges, and stop the appeals. I did not get the courtesy of a reply. In my letter, I asked, why does Gacy have the right to have a girlfriend? Why does he have the right to sell his paintings? And all the questions I was asking, I was appealing, but I have no right to an appeal. Gacy has the rights to appeal after appeal after appeal. He was convicted on my son's 21st birthday, March 13th, when he was 21 years old. My Johnny would have been 31 years old, and Gacy still lives on and still has rights to appeal.
There's John. Is that a Marine Corps uniform?
That is my son, Johnny.
Geraldo, it's so strange that Manson was convicted on Sharon's birthday, January 24th. How about
Isn't
that?
it?
Maybe it's poetic justice.
Both still around. Nisa and Jerry, I met you so long ago. 1977 it was. Mm-hmm. David Berkowitz, although I guess we didn't know who he was at the time, the son of Sam, had claimed your daughter Stacy. Your feelings on his situation?
They haven't changed.
They haven't changed. I don't agree with what was said before. I can't see anybody sitting in prison and people like us paying for it. We're paying for it, everybody here. Why? Why? What is the solution to all this? You read one day they did this, and then the next day it's another story, and every other day they're looking for parole, and he's coming up for parole. And I'll be very honest with you. I hope he gets it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Because I'll be waiting for him.
Another man, Daniel Rakowitz, has not yet been convicted. He has a confession to the cops. This is the guy with the ballet dancer girlfriend down in the Lower East Side, the man who called us when Professor Glass and I were on talking about his case a couple of weeks ago. The story broke in September. He is an alleged Manson-type killer, and he's accused now of killing and dismembering the young Swiss dancer who spurned him, evidently. Before we begin with our experts to talk about all of these cases, Rakowitz included, I want to run this tape for you. I warn you. We started this program with a disclaimer, parental discretion being strongly advised. I warn you. The pictures that this man paints with his words are disgusting. Don't listen if you can't stomach a bizarre story of butchery.
You're not denying that you killed your girlfriend roommate, are you?
Completely.
You are denying it?
Yeah, I'm a drifter from Texas. As it says in the thing, you know, I smoke a lot of pot. Sometimes I trip out the acid. And, wow, it was like the most horrible scene.
Now, you tell me how you could live in an apartment with the pieces of a person rotting away with decay and not know it.
I was totally sick during that period.
So you didn't kill her?
On October 5th, 1989, in New York State Supreme Court, Daniel Rakowitz was indicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence in connection with the bizarre summer slaying and dismemberment of Monica Burley. If convicted, each murder count carries a maximum sentence of 25 years to life.
Because I was really frightened of going to jail. I couldn't believe the whole damn thing.
And for how long were the bones and body parts in your apartment?
Maybe 10 days.
10 days? For 10 days you let the corpse of your girlfriend rot in your apartment and you didn't tell the cops?
I was flipping out. I mean, see, I've never been around that before.
Describe how you helped wash the bones of your girlfriend.
Just with a little wash rag and stuff.
Well, wait a second, hold on. I want you to answer my question. Did you, what, get on your knees by the bathtub and scrub her bones?
No, I just washed them in the sink.
You washed her bones in the sink?
You know what my friends was wanting to do with her?
What?
They was wanting to dump her in East River.
And you wanted to wash her bones?
I wanted to keep them for the mother.
What'd you, oh, God.
Can you imagine it?
No, I can't. What did you do with the
Judged by psychiatrists to be fit to stand trial. He is currently awaiting trial in one of New York City's most secure facilities, the maximum security area at the Brooklyn House of Detention.
Tell me the truth, Daniel. I want to know. Did you... Come on, Daniel, what's the truth?
The truth is that I never seen nothing as horrible as this.
I agree. I've never seen anything as horrible as this either, and you evidently were the perpetrator of this horror.
Take a break. Stay with us, folks. People who should never get out of jail are our focus. We're talking about Manson and Speck and Berkowitz and Ramirez, Gacy, and, if convicted, Daniel Rakowitz. Stay with us. People who should never get out of jail, that's our focus.
What I wanted to ask was, it's like a 2-part question. If Dolores, if that killer is in jail and he is allowed to stay alive and we got to pay for it, do the paintings that he make any money, and why is that not distributed as some sort of restitution, even though none is possible to the victim?
Dolores?
Those monies were supposed to be turned over to the victims' families, but now I was told that that money is to pay for his room and board. So my thought is that they're going to keep him alive forever as long as he's making money for the institution.
That's wrong.
Wrong.
Sorry. A law was passed and any money's derived from a crime are supposed to go to New York, to the Crime Commission.
In New York and other states.
Which
it's called
is
the Son of Sam
absolutely
Law.
a farce, because it's never happened, very rarely. And it's not right. And meanwhile, we're still paying for it. And it's got to end somewhere. The governor don't care. Every time it comes up, he turns it down. Governor Carey, who I met,
the governor at the
was a
time
waste
in
of
New York
time.
State, 1977.
An absolute waste.
All right. Let me just point out, you saw the Rakowitz interview. You heard his admissions. I tell you that we have edited, as horrible as that was, we edited 90% of it out because it's much, much worse than that. And under our system of law, he is, of course, innocent until he's proven guilty. Happily, he has been found competent to stand trial.
Don't mean anything.
Well, let me start with you, Detective Gallagher. Where does he rate in your view as a professional, long-time cop?
As a homicide detective lieutenant, he's a killer. And I have a funny feeling about killers. I've seen too many people die over the years, hundreds and hundreds of homicide victims, how hard they die. And I'm an equal opportunity guy. I think that killers should die just like the victims die. You kill, you die.
Oh, wonderful.
Ted Bundy, God bless the governor of the state of Florida, Ted Bundy, right up to the final finish line. He was saying, if you give me some time, I'll tell you how many other homicides I committed throughout the country. And the good governor said, you killed a little girl in the state of Florida, you're going to die, period. That's it. And he died.
Dr. Glass, an analysis of Rakowitz.
Well, the first thing you have to start with is the way he looks.
His appearance is certainly out of the ordinary, even in New York, I would say. It harkens back to an earlier time, maybe the mid-60s, early 60s. His speech, while on the one hand seems coherent and to make sense, obviously there's a great distortion between his words and his emotions. I don't believe anybody could talk about those things in a calm way and really have a sense of the horror, the absolute tragic horror that went on. So there are two issues, and the real issue here, I don't want people to get excited, is there is the issue of mental illness, which is very different from not guilty by reason of insanity. Those are two different issues. Many people are mentally ill. Very few of them kill. Very few killers are mentally ill. On the other hand, insanity is not a psychiatric term. Insanity is a legal term, and it requires psychiatrists to adapt certain principles of mental health and psychiatry to the law, a difficult concept, so that while many of the people that we're talking about today, I think we can state with some conviction, have mental illnesses, what we might call in the vernacular crazy, that doesn't make them insane under the law. And I think with Mr. Rakowitz, it certainly appears to me that there's some evidence of mental illness. I would not speak to whether or not he's insane.
Jimmy Fox, Professor Fox, is he crazy like a fox, in a sense? What I mean is, after having committed a murder, isn't it in the vested interest of the killer to make it look like a huge satanic situation going down, or a bizarre madman doing these things just to prove himself so crazy that you can't convict him of murder?
Well, it's very difficult for most any killer to be found insane in a courtroom setting. You know, juries generally don't want to buy the fact that someone is not guilty by reason of insanity. First of all, it's a defense that's rarely used, and when it's used, it's very rarely successful. What's interesting about this case is that he'd call you up, and then he'd talk about it so dispassionately, without any feelings of remorse. That's what's interesting here.
A lot like David Berkowitz, or very different, Maury?
Very different, Geraldo. Berkowitz is by no means insane. The story that Berkowitz concocted at the time of his arrest about barking dogs and demons and so on and so forth, that was a totally made-up story. It was a fabrication. Berkowitz, as I know you know, was involved with other people. And this whole idea of dogs and demons was just to cover up what was really going on in the case and to prevent an investigation from going further, which may have led to the arrest of other people who were involved with Berkowitz.
Stacy, do you think David Berkowitz was one of a group of killers?
I'm Nisa.
I'm sorry, Nisa. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Stacy,
I'm
sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. Just threw me for a second. What was the question?
Do you think that Berkowitz had accomplices?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. But I'll tell you something. What I'm hearing today and listening to these people that have suffered, the victims, okay? I think it's sick. It sucks. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say, that they won't cut me off here, that we have to live with this. The criminal has everything. We have nothing. And I'm sick to death of listening to this garbage of this one is this one has art selling, and they shot, this one, two people he shot, a well-known, renowned actress.
36.
36? I mean, like, this is sick.
They're crazy like a fox.
Exactly.
Is what they
and
are.
I don't
crazy
feel
like a fox.
that the people should keep this, put these people in office. Get them the hell out of there and put somebody in there that can do something. Really, what is the world going to come to? You can't live anywhere.
When we talk about these things like whether Manson wants his guitar or Gacy wants his art, we're really talking about minutia here. Because none of us here will trade places, will you? You won't. I mean, it's not so great in prison regardless of what they get.
Who the hell cares how great it is? They're still alive. My daughter is dead. These people are dead.
You say it's not so good in prison.
It's not so.
None of us will trade places, Here's a man sitting here that visits Berkowitz. Am I right, Maury?
I have.
The man's in a prison with carpeted floors, with a color TV. He has a gym. He weightlifts. You have a gym?
My daughter is dead.
My daughter's laying in the cemetery.
I can live free, and these people can't, and they should never live free.
It was his choice to get in there.
We have to take a break. I'm sorry. We'll come back.
On that.
Okay. You can disagree in 2 minutes when we come back. Be right back. Our focus is people who should never get out of jail. Sorry. Chris, Ginny?
We lost our freedom August 6, 1985. Every night now when the sun goes down, we don't know what to expect. You know, there's more than one bad person in this world. And you say the word, you're free. Well, I'm glad you're free, because mentally I'm not free when that sun goes down. I have to protect my family and myself. I can't walk up to a stranger anymore and say hello unless I know that person within reason. I'll let my wife finish here.
Living the way we have the last 4 years is a prison. And this is a sentence that was handed down to us by someone who did not know us. We were ordinary people, much like everyone else in this audience. A violent crime can happen to anyone, mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, and uncle. There is nothing to distinguish you from anyone else. You live in a prison that this person put you in for reasons known only to him. He lives in a cell. He is fed 3 meals a day. For at least a year, we did not know where our next meal was coming from. He was out of work for 6 months. I am now out of work due to my injuries. We have had to reevaluate, move, change our lifestyles. You know, you talk about a crime that happens in a community. It just does not happen to people like my husband and myself or the parents of victims. It happens to all of you. I liken it to a pebble in the pond. Yes, the rings are heavy at first, but it reverberates outwards, and it touches every one of us. And we are all responsible for this. I really feel that we owe it to ourselves to stand up for what we believe for and to go out and fight for it.
Dr. Glass?
I couldn't agree more in a certain sense with the Petersons and other people on the panel. No matter how we hear about it, no matter how we listen to it, and I've worked with scores of survivors of things of this nature, people much like those on the panel, there is no way, no matter how often we hear it, that we can feel the pain that they feel. That's correct, and I give that to them, and there's no way that we can experience what you've experienced. On the other hand, it is also real that the issue of the death penalty is literally a political issue. There are times in society when the world is willing to allow that to happen because we're very conservative and we're into retribution. And there are other times when society is more free and more liberal and we say, that's not the way to go. The people that we're talking about today, these are the highlights, the creme de la creme of the terrors, of the monsters, as Geraldo refers to them. The fact is that society, the legal system responds in a large part to societal demands. No mass murderer, in my knowledge, and Dr. Fox and I were talking about this, has ever been found not guilty by reason of insanity, although many of them were clearly crazy. While it is theoretically possible that any one of these people can indeed be paroled, it has not happened yet. The reason it doesn't happen...
It will.
The reason it doesn't happen is because of you, because of shows like this, and because of the effort by the public. The judges will not parole for that reason. If you are quiet and this doesn't occur, the person who's not known, the non-Charles Manson, the guy who shoots someone at McDonald's, where that person can get parole, that person can have things.
Let me just go to Doris here, who has devoted her life through the group, the Parents of Murdered Children, to keeping not just Charles Manson, but his family of killers behind bars. Because you remember, I will bet $1 million that there's not a person in this audience that can name all of the people who actually did the stabbing of Sharon Tate in her pregnant belly.
Except me.
Except Doris. Let's take a look. I interviewed Manson, as everyone knows, for that murder special last year. I talked with him about his so-called family. We'll see that tape now, and then we'll talk to Doris about it.
They seen something in me I didn't see in me.
What'd they say?
They seen a nice guy. And I'm not a nice guy.
I agree.
But they seen that. So I said, well, as long as they seen the nice guy, I'll reflect the nice guy. I'll be the nice guy to them. So I played as much nice guy as they could deal with. And I held the line of nice guy. And I looked out for everybody, and I gave them places to stay, and I kept all the other not-so-nice guys off of them.
So what'd they do?
They did whatever they did. That's a dispensation of the Pope. It's the same thing he does with the cardinals, man. It's the same thing they do with the committee.
Did you tell those women to kill somebody?
Dude.
Melcher somebody, someone who reneged on a drug debt?
Hey, let me tell you something about it.
Tell me something.
The women I got, I don't got to tell them what to do. If I got to tell them what to do, I'll set them up on the highway and get them away from me. I don't deal with women I got to tell them what to do. They know what to do. If they don't know what to do, they better stay away from me.
And in your case, they knew to kill.
They knew to take care of me.
They knew to kill
They
for
knew
you.
to look out for number one.
They knew to kill for you.
No, kill.
They knew to kill pregnant women.
I don't break laws. I make laws. I'm the lawmaker. I'm the one that lays the track down. They drive the train. I lay the track. I make the law. If I take this chair and I knock that light down, I'll make a whole new procedure with it.
Yeah.
I make the laws from here. This is me. Nixon was only playing with me. That's me. Now, I admit I influenced everybody out there at that ranch. I take responsibility for those 9 people getting killed.
Do you feel remorse?
I don't know what that is.
You know what I think? I think that you are an evil person.
Right, I'm evil. I'm terrible.
Is it easy to take a life?
I never took anybody's life.
Is it easy to stick a knife in somebody's body?
I generally don't stick people. I cut them a couple times first and make them show them that I can, but I've never really stuck anybody, not stuck a knife in them. I cut them a couple times, show them I could, and then tell them, you know, don't make me do this no more.
Nice phone.
We'll take a break. Doris will tell us what the status of the Manson family of killers is right now in the state of California. We'll be back.
Doris.
Does Manson generate any response, any reaction from you, Doris, when you see him on videotape?
Yeah. I want to choke a little, you know, and I can't say it on TV, okay? He and his followers are professionals at manipulation, and you know that as well as I do, correct? The one that I'm very concerned about is not even in my case. It's Leslie Van Houten, okay? She killed Rosemary LaBianca. And because they don't know if she was already dead while she was stabbing, okay, she is likely to get off. If they start one, they could start all of them. And then it will get into...
So it's Leslie Van Houten.
Leslie Van Houten.
Patricia Krenwinkel, is that?
Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, Tex Watson, and Susan Atkins, the one that killed Sharon.
They look so cleaned up now when you see that picture.
Hey, Watson has 3 children through conjugal visitations, and he killed my pregnant daughter. His ambition is life to get out of prison. Mine is to keep him in, and I bet I win.
You know, you talk about our justice system. And what justice? My uncle was killed in his backyard when he was getting out of his truck one night. The man admitted that he did it, but he was given second-degree murder because they could not find a murder weapon, even though he had admitted it. And 3 years later, he's out walking the street, a free man. And we all still have to live with the hurt.
You know, that's because that was his first crime. I'll bet you 2 bits. First murder. First murder. They do not give the death penalty.
That follows what Professor Fox was saying. Aren't those the guys who can sleaze their way out?
Pretty much a good, clean record before, but we're back to the bottom line again. The victim is still dead, and the person that made that victim dead is walking, and that's something wrong with the system that permits this to exist.
You know what is amazing is that had Richard Ramirez only been convicted of 2 attempted murders on my husband and myself, Jim Baker is going to be in jail longer than he would have been.
45 years.
You talk about a discrepancy.
It seems unjust that the people's taxes are paying to house and clothe and feed and keep these people warm. Well, I walk to school every day and see homeless people on the streets starving and cold.
And they even have professors come in and teach them. They are allowed that. They are allowed that. I have to pay for my children's education.
If you actually calculate, you take your tax bills and the revenues and
if you don't be quiet with these things, really, you better be quiet. I swear you'll be wearing my nails. You better be quiet. I'm warning you.
Every person you execute, the taxpayers save 1 cent per year. We're not going to save a lot of money because we're executing a few dozen people a year.
Dr. Glass, go. Hold it.
They let him out of the Florida prisons. He killed his mother. He was out
in 8 years. I'm not in favor of letting them out.
Nobody here has said... He killed 300
Nobody.
Got to take a break. Sorry. Take a break.
Nobody.
I want to quickly read this address here. Parents of murdered children, Post Office Box 2117, Palos Verdes, California 90274. Please contact them if you've been the victim of one of these homicidal crimes. They are an excellent support group. I recommend it with all my heart. People who should never get out of prison are focused, Dr. Glass.
Before the break, with the interchange here was like a therapy group in my office, and I feel compelled to make an interpretation. We're not talking about money. We're talking about revenge and hurt and pain. Whether it costs $3 a day or $3,600 a day to keep someone in prison is meaningless. Whether someone can paint or has carpeting is meaningless.
It is?
When you've lost as much, please, when you've lost as much as these people have lost, you have nothing but revenge to try and hope for. That's what they're looking for. But I would like to suggest that the death penalty to these people, taking away some of their amenities, is not going to ease the pain. It's not going to take away your suffering.
Yes, my sister-in-law's father was murdered by a man who they don't think can be convicted because he confessed the crime to another man. That man called the police and told him. Then he murdered that man. And they said, now what do they think of laws that protect criminals to their advantage because they can't use hearsay evidence? And he murdered the person he confessed to. They found they can convict him of that murder.
Let me just say in general terms, excuse me, without, stirring up the emotional pot here. Maury, I'll give you the first shot. Isn't it conceivable that the law, our great system, and the Republic of Canada has a system not unlike ours, to protect the rights of the person until found guilty, isn't it possible that the rights of the victim have been lost somewhere in the exchange?
I think that that's happened, and I think that organizations are now in existence to try to do something about that, like Doris is involved with, and others. I think that the focus has gone off the victim, and the pendulum has swung too much to the other side, to where the rights of the criminal have become sacrosanct. I think it has to go back to the middle.
Jamie, give us that much.
What I give you is that I am a full supporter of victim rights and written about victims and survivors, but whenever there's a clash, that's where we have to look at the fact that the criminal is still the one who's under a sentence, who's facing jeopardy in the courtroom. Let's have all the victims' rights we can, as long as we don't have to take away from the offender's rights.
Well, I remember, I grew up in Queens when I was a kid. And
Borough of New York.
Borough of New York. I remember Son of Sam vividly because my mother told me, reading the papers, and it didn't just affect them two, like she said, it affected the whole city. Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, everything. And if you want somebody to stand behind him when he comes out of Rikers Island, I'll be right behind him and show the whole answer report.
Recently, I read an article about a murder of mass children, and the Canada is paying this man $10,000 to the bodies of the children, to show them the bodies of the children, so that they can close the cases on this just knowing the whereabouts. So therefore, to make money off of it, I don't think that they should make that the murderers should make money off of the victims, and they're trying to in this country get an organization together for these victims, so that the money is not made from these murderers on them children.
That's one thing. The Son of Sam law did say that the murderers cannot profit from their awful crimes. I don't know the specific case in Canada that the lady...
But how many lives had to be wasted?
How many lives had to
And
be wasted?
Geraldo, we always hear that everything is politically motivated.
Right.
Okay, in the state of Illinois right now, Governor Thompson is going out of office. Okay, they say it is up to the governor, you know, at the end of these appeals, whether Gacy will be convicted or not. He's going out of office. Will this be his last hurrah that he will try to have Gacy executed, or will he drop it? I mean, because he's not running again, so that's not going to be an incentive, you know, for people to vote for him. So here we go dropping it again, I imagine.
Okay. We've got to take a break. Sorry, hold it. We've got to take a break.
Boy, you're not quiet.
Nisa, last thoughts.
What?
About people who shouldn't get out of prison.
Personally, if I can't kill them myself, put them on a damn island like the lepers. Let them fend for themselves. That's what they do with the lepers. They were contagious to each other. They were contagious to all around. Put them on an island. Let them all fend. Let them kill themselves. I don't give a damn.
Jenny?
I'd like to address something Mr. Fox said. Lady Justice, for those who have seen us, she's blindfolded and she holds the scales. And while I dare not speak for all of us, I think people here will agree with me. We are not asking for any more than what the criminal has. We would just like to see those scales balanced.
You can talk to
so
me.
that we have equal opportunity to have our voices heard. Not a debate on whether the death penalty is good or bad, but that these people be segregated, like you said, to be put away where they can contaminate society no longer.
The one point I'd like to make, and I'd like you to show Doris Tate when I'm saying this, she has worked tirelessly by showing up at the parole board hearings year after year after year. It is a pain in the neck. You prolong your agony, but that is the only way to ensure that they stay behind.
That's right.
Bars. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you in the audience. Thank you folks at home for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Tomorrow, every parent's worst nightmare. Entire communities in a state of shock. Kidnapped kids and their parents' pain, anguish, and hope. Tomorrow.